people, what's the biggest mistake you made at your wedding?
Honey, I love you, but said I do. Not my mistake. Not my mistake. I love my wife.
Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Grizzly True Crime. My name is Grizzly K, and today we are looking at a summary of day 6 of the Timothy Bliefnick trial, and we will also watch the closing arguments that took place today. And then the jury is busy deliberating. They've been deliberating for 1 hour already, and they have a question now. At the moment, I'm following Muddy River News on Twitter because they give minute-by-minute updates. So do a few other places as well, but I've really been enjoying their updates, so I'm just looking to see what they say there. So we are having a look, okay. Mic check, is everyone fine? You guys are saying no sound, but sound is good, right? Okay. So, let me make myself a little smaller here so that we can actually see the presentation. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to all my moderators, to all my patrons. Thank you so much for your support. Patreon is a huge source of support, so thank you so much. Welcome to all my members. If you see their names highlighted, that would be members. If you see the wrenches, those are moderators, yes? Okay, everyone's saying sound is good. Sound check, mic check, before we get started, you know. So let's quickly have a look at the summary of day 6, which was yesterday. So, Timothy Bliefnick, trial day 6, charges. He's facing 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of home invasion. The victim's name is Rebecca Bliefnick. She was 41 years old. She was found shot 14 times in her home in Quincy, Illinois on February 23rd, 2023. So yes, this trial happened really fast. If you want to know why, just go to the timestamps of all the other trials updates that I've done for you because we've gone over that so many times. Also, please do check the playlist for this case if you do want to catch up on all the trial summaries, which takes hours to make for you. So I hope you will check it out, give it a thumbs up, share it as well. Really enjoy doing it for you and bringing you summaries, and I can't wait to show you the closing arguments and to see if the jury comes back with a verdict today. Let's have a look if that does happen. Kellyanne, thank you for being a member for 6 months. That's awesome. Wait, there we go. Show the chat. There we go. Thank you so much for being a member for 6 months. And welcome to everyone. Thank you, Ernestine, for sharing the purple hearts. The purple hearts, thank you everyone for sharing it. I see it now, is for DV awareness. So please keep sharing it. Please share this episode. Hashtag Bliefnick trial is one that's being used, I see, on social media. Also, DV awareness, very important. And before I get into this, remember the distress signal for DV goes like this. So if you see someone doing this, just know they are signaling you to call for help. Okay, it's best to call the police. That would be probably what to do there, I would say, in that scenario. But this is the distress signal for DV. Some people have used it to, like, literally lives have been saved just if they are in distress in general, or in danger, if their life's in danger. So just have a look out for that. But now you know it, okay? So let's quickly go over day 6's summary. Aloha, everyone. Welcome. So the witness was, there was a witness, Christine Mandel. She worked for Rebecca at Q-Town CrossFit in Quincy, Illinois. Let's just move this down a bit. On March 14th, actually, 2022, Rebecca sent her messages about Tim and her divorce. So we're going to look at some of those now. So let's just make it like this. Okay. So she said, "Becky, are you safe?" And Rebecca said, I told you your jaw would drop. I feel safe right now. I'm super nervous for when this ends. If he doesn't get his way, I feel he may literally lose his mind. She also said he wants everything. Wants sole custody of the kids. Wants all the money, all the assets. Wants me to suffer. And she said, I got a security system. Christine said that she felt that she did the right thing, which was to listen to her. This was the witness that I said the defense absolutely grilled. It was terrible to watch because they really went hard on this witness. Like, so after all that, you didn't do anything, right? Nothing. You did nothing. Like, oh man. Like total guilt tripping, you know. It was terrible. She broke down on the stand. But she said she felt that she did the right thing, which was to listen to her. Now, what can we learn from that? If you suspect that your friend is talking about DV or their life being in danger, it might be a good idea to call the police or a DV shelter or someone. Call someone for help or her parents or whatever in the scenario. As I say, we are not blaming anyone for anything. We are just learning as much as we can, because is that not what all this true crime is for? To learn from, right? So that we can all help ourselves, help others to live as safely as possible. Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you missed any of today's stream so far, I hope you'll go back and catch up at 1.5 speed. So then she said, but I've had some serious PTSD with all this and the things I found out. Plus, I've had not one, but 2 co-workers get murdered by their exes in the last year, which has totally made me a nervous Nelly. That's sad. That sucks. She knew the stats, you know, like, oh my word, my 2 co-workers murdered by their exes. I'm so nervous. She said she's a nervous Nelly. If you see the little green dots, it's because they had a laser pointer and I was taking screenshots for you, okay? She's okay. And then her friend said, I'd rather let people believe what he tells him and stay alive. Oh, no, sorry. Focus. This is what Becky also said. I'd rather let people believe what he tells him and stay alive for my kids. It sounds so crazy to say that out loud, but it's not out of the realm of possibility that he would go off the deep end. He literally cares more about hurting me than anything else. I literally would never trust him to ever let him in my house if it was just us. So that is a big red flag. Of course, the defense has very strong arguments. They said this case is dripping in reasonable doubt, which it is a little bit, you know, they're poking such holes in it. There's no DNA on the bicycle. The shoe print was just a partial shoe print. They couldn't match it to one of his shoes. The only solid evidence so far that they have is the shell casings around her body matching the shell casing, the spent shell casing in his basement. That, and yes, the Google searches, but they have no proof of exactly when those Google searches happened. But in the closing arguments, which we're going to listen to, they did say, the prosecution came back with, well, how did he know exactly what to Google before all the evidence was even out? That was a good point, because I was like, ooh, what are they going to say now? Daphne Rain, thank you so much. Welcome to membership. We will have a member stream again very, very soon. I've just been so busy with this, summarizing this trial for you guys. Okay, then there was a witness, Kelly Masijewski. I don't know how to say it. I heard it when she said it. I'm like, okay, I'm going to practice. Kelly, okay, Illinois State Police Biology and DNA section, that's where she works. She compared DNA for Tim, Rebecca, the kids, and Ted Johnson. If you don't know who Ted Johnson is, that would be Rebecca's boyfriend at the time. DNA was compared to the blue bike, to the patio chair, to the door handle, and to the plastic near Becky's body. DNA was removed from the bike handlebars. There was not enough DNA to determine a match. I think he wore gloves. I think so, because they found like latex gloves at his house. So I'm not sure, because otherwise how? He may have worn gloves, you know? They didn't find it on the window frame. They didn't find it on that patio chair. They didn't find it on the bicycle DNA. So if he's innocent or proven guilty in a court of law, the jury's busy deliberating in his trial, right? So closing arguments, we're going to watch that together. If he did it, whoever did it, they covered their tracks, right? Or bike gloves. Yes. Stefan says bike gloves. There were many pairs of gloves that they looked at, yes. In his car, in his basement, and everything, yes. Jean says, love the summaries and bullet points. Yeah. No DNA doesn't mean he didn't do it. I'm sure he wore gloves. It doesn't mean it. I'm just saying that, my word, the defense has a pretty strong case in this one. Okay. So they said that skin under Becky's fingernails had DNA. The results support Tim Bliefnick's DNA contribution and not Ted's, but it could also be any of the Bliefnick children. So that's what they said. Today, the prosecutor said, because I've been watching all day as they've been tweeting about it and everything, and now it's finally available on Facebook and hopefully soon on Muddy River News as well. We're going to watch it together, but they did say she went for that operation that we talked about yesterday with a timeline, and so she would have washed her hands and everything before then and hadn't seen the kids since. So the more likely DNA under her fingernails would be Tim's, but that was inconclusive, right? So then there was a witness, James Riggins. He works for the Illinois State Police as a forensic scientist and specializes in trace analysis. And he said that the evidence of plastic, there were little bits of plastic found all around Becky's body. And he said they are similar to an ALDI bag. The defense gets James to confirm, though, that there was no scientific certainty that it was an ALDI bag, just similarities, which he did say that as well, yes. Amanda Green says, I don't understand why the other messages weren't allowed in today. Then she wasn't allowed to say what they had spoken about in those messages. His lawyer is so awful. Yeah. Always, well, she's doing her job well, right? But yes, I wonder as well. I also wonder what is in those messages. There must be more. And she said, the defense attorney is saying, it's just girl talk. It's just divorce talk. It's woman blowing off steam. It sounds a little more true crimey to me, right? Okay. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Hope you have liked the video. Hope you are subscribed. Hit the bell so you don't miss out, okay? And I am monitoring what's happening right now as the jury deliberates. The jury's been deliberating for over an hour now. They said they have one question. They haven't posted that on Twitter yet, so we'll wait to see what that says, right? Okay. So you can see the picture of a ALDI bag, a whole one that says East Toast. I quite like that. East Toast, West Toast. Okay, and then you can see the pieces of plastic that were found around her body, which does seem to look like one, but I get why the defense is saying it's with not certainty, right? It's similarity. Yes. Okay. Christine Carver says, thanks for all your hard work, G, for us. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. And thank you for being a member for 8 months. That's awesome. Thank you all for your support. I really appreciate it. You keep me going. Let me just move this for you. There was a witness, Catherine Doolin. This is from yesterday, remember, day 6. A forensic scientist at Illinois State Police, specializing in firearms, tool marks, tire tracks, and footwear analysis. There was not a complete shoe or footprint from Rebecca's house, just from the toe to the arch. So I don't know if he was like tiptoeing around or what. And it was just there going into the bedroom window, right? Just a partial, and then also a pair of shoes to compare it to. And she could not conclude that those shoes made the print. So, yes. Christina Lasker says, thanks for covering less popular cases. Love ya. Thank you so much, Christina. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I found this case like really interesting. I was watching it for the first week thinking, okay, let's see how it goes. But then I'm like, oh my word. The more it went on, the more I'm like, wait, what? So, yes. Question, how can you be so horrible? That's what it should say. What are we talking about? The question, right? That the jury's asking? Yes, okay. And so Catherine had also tested tools to see what made the mark on the window, and that was also inconclusive. A complete ID could not be made, but a crowbar could not be eliminated. So they couldn't say it was definitely exactly this type of a crowbar or this one specifically, but they couldn't eliminate the possibility that it was a crowbar. So then there was a witness, Vicky Reels, a forensic scientist at Illinois State Police, firearms, footwear, tire track examination. And she said 8 shell casings found by Rebecca's body were fired. This is for me the most damning evidence. If you've been watching the trial, let me know what you think. But they say the 8 shell casings found by Rebecca's body were fired by the same gun as 27 shell casings found in Tim's basement. Remember, the weapon has not been found. 27 of the 54 shells tested were fired by the same gun that fired the bullets that killed Becky. A peer review process also confirmed her findings. So yes, there wasn't any ALDI bags as well found in Rebecca's house, only in Tim's house. Then there was a witness, Nicholas Eddy, a Quincy PD detective, the only witness for the afternoon yesterday. He reviewed text messages on Becky's phone. Remember, Rebecca Bliefnick is Becky. Her nickname is Becky, so in the trial they also call her Becky sometimes. Okay, so there were text messages reviewed, and there were no arguments in the text messages between her and Ted Johnson, who was her boyfriend. There were 2 pairs of gloves found in Tim's car and ALDI bags. So there's that. But does that prove anything? Not really, unfortunately. Yes. So here on the 21st of Feb 2023 at 7:46 p.m., when Rebecca... 21st of Feb. She went to a friend's... Sorry, I need to look at a calendar like old school style. I was born in 1984. It's been 84 years. Okay, no. So I just really want to see which date she had gone exactly, just to refresh my memory. For the operation was on the 20th. So she was back at home on the 21st, which was a Tuesday. So she wrote a message to Tim, and the subject was kids, and this was on an app called Our Family Wizard. And she said, "Are you able to keep the kids tomorrow? I do not feel good today and feeling worse as the night goes on." He said, "Yes, I can keep them. I assume you're referring to overnight as well, unless something drastic changes tomorrow during the day with how you feel." Okay. And then she said, "Correct, overnight. So you would pick them up from school and keep them Wednesday overnight." It would be that Wednesday night that she was murdered. Yes. So, wow. MP says, "G and mods are the best. Thank you for all you do." Thank you so much, and thank you for being a member for 5 months. And then he said, "Yes, I can." So, even though he's innocent till proven guilty in a court of law, the jury is busy deliberating. The lesson I learned from this is if you are fearing for your life from someone, if you feel like they're a huge threat, they're not safe, okay? Don't tell them when you're vulnerable. In fact, don't tell anyone when you're vulnerable unless you really trust them, right? Because she, saying, "I don't feel good, I'm feeling worse as the night goes on, can you please keep the kids?" Man, so he knew she wasn't feeling strong. That to me is a bit of a red flag, Anyway, moving on. So let me just take my logo off so you could see. Then Detective Eddie said Johnson, that's Ted, the boyfriend, was given a gunshot residue test on the evening of her death on February 23rd, 2023. Ted is not a suspect in this case. So they made that clear as well. Okay. He reviewed lots of surveillance video and spotted someone riding a bike around the bus barn, which is very close. We've done some map time about that as well. Very close to, between the 2 houses, right? He was riding a bike around the bus barn on February 14th at 12:29 a.m. So those are the practice rounds. Tim's phone, laptop, and Whoop fitness devices were also reviewed, and the times that he was not active on his devices was of interest. There were more than 1 million lines of data that were reviewed. The Whoop inactive, when the Whoop was inactive, the bicycle surveillance, those 2 matched. So when somebody was on the bicycle going between his house and her house, his Whoop and laptop and things like that were inactive. So was his phone. So that's interesting evidence as well. And of course, they said now, since he was arrested, no one has been seen again on a bike going between the 2 houses. All right, so Detective Eddie said that on February 22nd, there were 2 gaps between the Whoop and the phone data. The first was from 12:42 a.m. to 1:16 a.m., and the second was from 1:39 a.m. to 2:19 a.m. On February 23rd, the Whoop wasn't connected to the phone from 12:36 a.m. to 2:01 a.m. That's the time frame in which she was murdered. She was murdered on February 23rd, 2023 at around 1:12 a.m. Yes. So a trailer park in a lagoon were also searched for evidence, is what they also said. They searched all over, right? Okay, so that's the summary from then. Let me just quickly check Twitter here just to see what's happening. Yeah, they don't say what that question is. Why? Let's hear the question. Wait, let's find latest. Jury's been out for more than an hour, now has a question, waiting to hear what it is. Okay, so we're waiting to hear what it is. That's what they all say. Okay. I just quickly want to check Muddy River News to see if they've got... Oh, the closing arguments. They're busy uploading it. Okay, yeah, that's going to be better quality. So hold on. I just want to switch this over. I know you can't see what I'm doing, but I'm just quickly putting this on for you. There we go. just in case you want a little Maptime reminder. This was in Quincy, Illinois, and Tim's house is over here, and Rebecca's house is over here on Kentucky Road, and that would only be a 4-minute drive or so. 5-minute quick cycle as well. And let me show you his house, by the way. It's over here, and the bicycle was found directly east. I did this whole little building thing with the Google Man the other day. This way, zoom in. The bicycle was found abandoned over here. The one that he had created a fake Facebook account called John Smith, and had been interested in that specific bicycle, and that bicycle was found abandoned over here. So there's that as well. So that was just a very quick map time. Now, let's just turn the boost on. Thank you to Muddy River News for uploading a very nice copy here. Let's just see the quality. Yeah, we want HD. We've got the Grizzly boost on. We've got HD footage here. And let me just quickly do this. Full screen. Okay. Closing arguments. Are we ready, everyone? And by the way, the boyfriend did not ever... Thank you, Barbara, for asking. He didn't ever testify. They asked him this morning, are you going to testify? And he did not testify. Oh, sorry. PK is asking, where's the bus bar? Wait. Let's quickly do that. The bus station is right here. Right here. And the route that I've got here is the route he cycled. The route the person cycled was around this way. Let's just see where the house is. Kentucky Road. Nope. It was actually, he went down on 20th and east on Prairie. There we go. This is the exact route that was cycled many times on February, if I remember correctly, 13th and 14th, and then again on the 21st and the 22nd, and then on the 23rd, and all of that, right? So his house is there. The bicycle was found abandoned there. The bus barn is right here, Quincy Public School bus barn. There's video surveillance that caught him, or whoever, they can't say exactly who, caught a person riding a bicycle past here and going down 20th Street. So yeah, it would actually be this other way around, this way. He probably went this way and down here. Okay, are we ready now for closing arguments? Here we go. Let's just close this. Hello. Close it. Yes, sorry. There we go. And full page. And a Grizzly boost. Off we go.
170 People versus Timothy Bliefnick. Mr. Bliefnick is present in court along with his attorney.
Tell me if it's too loud.
Ms. Casey Schnock. People appear by Assistant State's Attorney Josh Jones and Laura Keck. And while we are waiting, then we are going to have a formal jury instruction conference. And then Ms. Schnock, are you ready?
I'm ready. I don't know if the state has updated the instructions since yesterday afternoon or not.
The only thing we did was, we haven't updated anything. We're just going to withdraw the two instructions we talked about.
All right.
Okay. Yes, Your Honor. Ready.
Okay. So, People's Instruction number 1 is 1.01, the function of the court and the jury. Any objection, Ms. Schnock?
No, Your Honor.
All right, that will be given. People's Instruction number 2.
Pernille's like, it's sped up, everyone. Sorry about that. It is true. My default is like 1.5 speed. I did put it on 1.25 now, okay? I hope that's okay. If it's too fast for you, please let me know. I want to just skip to where they do the closing arguments. Come on now. Let's get to it. There we go. There we go. Okay. So 1.25 speed. Is that okay?
Security sees you with your cell phone, then you will be asked to leave the courtroom and you will not be allowed in until the next day. And that does not include the media, who are allowed to have their cell phones or other devices so that they can communicate with the public. However, if you are media, you need to have your ID badges on so security can know that you are media and they will not hassle you. Then having done that, Mr. Jones, are the people ready to present their closing argument?
We are.
I will be monitoring Twitter to see if there's any updates. If a verdict is reached, I will let you know, okay? I listen to everything at 1.5 or 2 times speed all YouTube videos, all podcasts and everything. If it's too fast for you, toggle your little gear setting and slow it down. Slow down my stream then to 0.75. It will slow the whole thing down for you, but we're going to listen to this one on 1.25 speed, okay? And also, I just quickly want to say thank you for all the coffees. Thank you everyone who's buying me coffees on buymeacoffee.com. Really appreciate it. Need those coffees. These trials are very tiring, okay? Thank you so much.
Ms. Schnock, is the defendant ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, then let's bring in the jury.
All right.
All right, Mr. Jones, you may be heard.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court, opposing counsel, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. On February 23rd, 2023, the defendant rode a bike with no reflectors on it that he had bought on Facebook to Becky Bliefnick's house. He rode that bike past the Quincy bus barn and past 224 South 20th Street, just like he did on February 14th, 21st, and 22nd. But on February 23rd, 2023, the defendant climbed up a chair in a pergola and onto Becky's roof. And he walked on her roof and he walked past 4 other windows to the window of a bedroom that he knew was empty. The window of a bedroom of a little boy who at that very moment was asleep in his father's house. And on February 23rd, 2023, the defendant pried open that window with a crowbar, just like he read on the internet. He climbed through that window and he broke down Becky's door and he chased her into a bathroom. Becky fell to the ground and the defendant looked down at her, looked her in the eyes, and shot her 14 times. He shot her with a gun with a homemade silencer that he read about on the internet. And on February 23rd, 2023, after he executed Becky in cold blood and left her there on that bathroom, slowly bleeding to death, surrounded by 8 shell casings, he rode that same bike past the Quincy bus barn, just like he did on February 14th.
Please tell me if it's too fast for you. I will put it on normal speed if I have to. The jury's been deliberating for over an hour now, and they did come back with a question, but they're not telling us yet what the question is. I am following on social media, so I will tell you as soon as I know. To Lance Phillips, thank you so much. Oh my word, thank you for your, keep it up, $5 super chat. I really appreciate it. Yeah, Miss Schnock. I really like it, Miss Schnock. That's the defense attorney's name.
21st and 22nd. He went back to his house, where police would later find 27 shell casings that exactly matched the 8 shell casings that were fired by the gun that shot and killed and executed Becky. The 27 shell casings in his house exactly matched the shell casings that were around Becky. Not the same type of gun, not the same brand of gun, the exact same gun fired all 37 shell casings. Just like identical twins have different fingerprints, each and every gun leaves a different fingerprint on every shell casing it fires. Each and every gun. And every one of those 35 shell casings had the same fingerprint. They were fired by the exact same gun. Not the same brand of gun, not the same type of gun. The exact same gun fired all 35 of those shell casings. Now what the defendant did on February 23rd, 2023 in Adams County is called home invasion and first-degree murder. And after you hear all the arguments, the judge is going to tell you that to prove those things, we have to prove certain elements. To prove home invasion, we have to prove these things on the screen. And usually what I would do in a closing argument is I read each of these propositions to you, and we talk about those propositions. And then I'd read the propositions for first-degree murder, and we talk about those propositions. But this case is different. This case isn't a propositions case. This case is about one question. This is a one proposition case, if you will. And the proposition is this. Did the defendant do it? Have we proven beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant did it? And after you hear the evidence, and after you hear the closing argument, if you believe that you've proven it beyond a reasonable doubt, then you find the defendant guilty. And what happened on February 23rd, 2023, that violent and tragic end to Becky Bliefnick's life? Well, it started on September 18th, 2009, when Becky and the defendant were married. After a few years, in January of 2021, January 21st, the defendant files for divorce. A few months later, in May of 2021, Becky starts to tell people about her fears, that something's not right. She tells Christine Moore, he screamed in my face. He shoved me in front of the kids. He's thrown things across the room where the kids and I were standing. He's punched a hole in the wall. If things really don't go his way, I feel he can be very unstable and unpredictable. And the thought's gone through my mind, if I may need a restraining order, I'm changing the locks as soon as I can. She tells Christine Moore that the only way the defendant has to make sure that the boys choose him over her is to eliminate her as a choice. Then on Mother's Day of May 2021, she tells her friend, Nicole Bateman, Tim told me if I outed his dad that he would probably have to move and then he would kill himself.
That was interesting. If I outed his dad, Tim's dad, he'd probably have to move and then kill himself. I do want to say that they said, Muddy Revenues, the jury just wanted to see a few exhibits. No need for them to be called back in. Deliberations continue. So that's what's happening. The jury is busy deliberating while we are watching closing arguments. Imagine if it would be timed, that they come back with a verdict as we're watching this. Just like, let us get through it though first. That would be amazing, right? Oh my word. But I am nervous about this one. I don't know about you. So you can see this, well, you can't see, sorry. It's 2 hours and 49 minutes, this entire video, which is why I want to watch it at 1.25 speed, if that's okay, so we can really power through all the information here together while we wait as the jury deliberates.
And yes, I absolutely worry he will try to take the kids sometime, especially if I get awarded the custody I want. He will be pissed, and he will do whatever he feels like doing.
Sorry, I have to correct myself. Yes, you're right. Did I say I was thinking of Tim? Tim did not testify. Tim, who is the defendant in this case, did not testify. Today was a very big, like, is he going to or not? He did not. But Ted, the boyfriend, did. But he wasn't on camera. That's where they show the ceiling, or just like a slide, right? Thank you so much, Sherry.
In June of 2021, Becky called out to another friend, to Becky Spots, and she tells Becky, I'm wanting to never have my children around them alone ever again. It's gotten to the point that I hate to even go to work for fear that he will secretly take off with the kids and I won't see them for a long time. Forever. I truly believe Tim has serious mental health problems and he's becoming more vengeful and unpredictable. And it scares me. But I'm scared to even try to get an order of protection because it will piss him off and he will try to punish me somehow. And I don't think an order of protection will be issued because they will say his violent outbursts have not been egregious enough and the incidents have been stretched out over too long a period. Temporary custody has not even been set yet because we haven't been to court. And I don't have even exclusive possession of our home. So I can't legally keep him away from me or the kids. Plus, if I ask for an order of protection, I won't be able to come see my children in his house anymore. And he may cut off their communication with me while they are there, and that scares me too. And then she tells Becky, it is a fucking nightmare. In August of 2021, she gets a court order. She gets a court order that says Ray Bliefnick, the defendant's father, can have no unsupervised contact with the boys. August of 2021. The defendant's required to pay her alimony of $2,100 a month and child support of $472 a month. September of 2021, she sends a message to her sister. If something ever happens to me, please make sure the number one person of interest is Tim, as that is who would do something to me. I'm putting this in writing that I'm fearful he will somehow harm me, come after me, or will try to do something to me that takes me away from the kids, or the kids away from me. He already has lied multiple times to paint himself as a victim and me as the perpetrator when it is the other way around. No, I have not said this to Mom or Dad, as I don't want them to be out of their mind with worry. And just 4 days later, she messages her friend Nicole Bateman again. A friend of mine from the ER was murdered last Friday by her ex. I literally had a panic attack Friday night thinking Tim is going to come after me and do the same if he continues to not get his way. If he's crazy enough to file this OOP and make all this crap up and blame it on me, what else is he willing to do? On top of the fact that he has all our guns and ammunition, including mine. And in October of 2021, we learned on October 15th, the defendant's cell phone was factory reset. So when the defense says, well, we don't know how old those searches were on his phone that we'll talk about, remember, his phone was factory reset on October 15th. Then on October 22nd, Becky gets another court order. This time, it's an order of injunction. Neither party shall go to the other party's residence except for the exchange of the minor children. I bring this up for this reason and this reason alone. It's perhaps possible that some of you are thinking, well, the defendant had a right to be at Becky's house still, so he can't commit home invasion because he had a right to be there. No, he did not. There was a court order that said, thou shalt not, and the defendant was told not to be there. He did not have a right to be at that house. That house on Kentucky Street, at that point, and until the divorce was settled, was Becky's, and Becky's alone. And in October 22nd of 2021, the defendant was ordered to give Becky that CZ75. And if he couldn't, he was ordered to give her a Ruger LCS.
I just quickly want to pause here. Paula says, wish she would have bought a gun. She did, but he took it and he wouldn't give it back. He was ordered to give it to her. She wanted to protect herself. But yes, I know what you mean. Maybe you wish you would have bought another gun, right? She was waiting for him to give back that weapon. So yes, I suppose that's another lesson in there. If there's an aggressor, someone you're fearing, someone not safe, don't wait for them to give you the protection you need. You're going to need to get it somewhere else, right? I hear you. I hear you.
Now, when he didn't give her that gun, Becky called the police. And the police went and talked to the defendant, and the defendant said, I don't know where the CZ is. And the police told Becky that, and Becky said, then I want to report the gun stolen because the defendant stole it. He hasn't given it back to me. He hasn't. Late fall, early winter of 2021, Becky cries out to another friend. She tells Amber Whitler, if anything ever happens to me, it was the defendant. And in March of 2022, she cries out to a friend in California. And she tells Christine Mendel, I feel safe right now, but I'm super nervous for when this ends. If he doesn't get his way, he might literally lose his mind. Tells her that she got a security system, that the defendant wants everything. He wants sole custody of the kids. He wants all the money, all the assets. He wants me to suffer. But I've had some serious PTSD with all this and the things I found out. Plus, I've had not one but two coworkers get murdered by their exes in the last year, which has totally made me a nervous Nelly. I'd rather let him believe what he tells me and stay alive for my kids. It sounds so crazy to say that out loud, but it's not out of the realm of possibility that he would go off the deep end. He literally cares more about hurting me than anything else. I literally would never trust him to ever let him in my house if it was just us. Then in June of 2022, she calls Gary Collins on the phone. She's crying. She's emotional. She's in tears. She tells Gary Collins, who was a police officer at the time, if anything happened to me, it was the defendant. In August of 2022, Becky gets another court order. Neither party shall go to the other party's residence except for the exchange of the minor children. I bring that up for just what we talked about. The defendant had no right to be at that house on Kentucky Street. Then in October of 2022, John Smith receives notification about Mike Blazing's bike being sold. I want to talk about this for just a minute. The defense might suggest that we don't know who John Smith was. And I guess my response to that would be this. If we're sitting here in the courtroom and we hear thunder outside and we see a flash of lightning and somebody walks through that door and they're wearing galoshes and they've got an umbrella in their hand, do you have to look out the window to know that it's raining? No, you don't. Do we know who John Smith was? Yeah. John Smith sits right there. John Smith drove an orange Rust CRV. That was the message that he sent. The defendant drives that same CRV. John Smith says that he's got long brown hair. The defendant had long brown hair. John Smith bought a black Mongoose bike. There was a black Mongoose bike in the defendant's garage. And John Smith got notifications on his phone about a blue bike with no reflectors that was sold by Mike Blazing to a tall, athletically built man. Do we have to look outside to know if it's raining? We know who John Smith is, and we know what John Smith did. December 2022, just 3 months before Becky was executed in cold blood, Becky files her pretrial affidavit. And in Becky's pretrial affidavit, she talks about that CZ75 again, because she didn't have it. There was no gun safe in her house. There was no ammunition found in her house. We've heard no evidence of that. She didn't have a gun. She wanted that gun back, and if the defendant didn't give her that CZ75, he was supposed to give her a Ruger 9 LCS. We'll talk about that Ruger LCS in a minute.
Jane, if you are on Twitter, it's hashtag Bliefnick trial, and just go to latest, you can see it there, all the stuff. But Muddy River News, who I've been following, but then there's also KHQA, Court TV, and a few others, WGEM News as well. So we're just checking that out, right? Okay, I'm monitoring it.
And in Becky's proposed parenting plan, talking about custody of the boys, Becky agreed to 50-50. Becky agreed to a fair split, 50-50 between her and the defendant. Compare that to the defendant's proposed parenting plan. When he filed the proposed parenting plan in December, he wanted 70-30 his way. She would have 4 overnights in a 14-day period. That's what the defendant wanted. Then in January of 2023, the defendant sends a letter to Becky about what he wanted. And what did he say? He said, well, I'll go 60-40. And I'll do 50-50 if you get a psychological evaluation. And he said, I'm not going to pay any child support. I'm only going to pay maintenance of $750. And you know that house that you've been living in with those boys for the 2 years? That's mine now. You get 60 days to find a new place to live. And my father, even though there's been a court order for 2 years that there's no unsupervised contact, my father can see the boys whenever he wants, supervised or unsupervised. That's what I want. That's what the defendant said he wanted in January of 2022. And on January 5th of 2023, I apologize, January of 2023. January 5th of 2023, Becky calls out again to a friend, Melissa Young. A friend she hadn't seen in a while. And what does her friend say? Her friend says, Becky looked emotionally drained and tired. And Becky said, the defendant told her, you'll be dead before you get my money. And Becky asked.
According to what I saw on Twitter, Tim was shaking his head when the prosecutor said exactly that. Whenever he refers to the text messages, then Tim is sitting in court shaking his head, no, no, no.
For prayers. Sometime in January, Becky calls out to her friend Sarah Murphy and says, if anything happens to me, you better go looking for the defendant. And the defendant told me, I'm tired of playing your stupid little game. And in January of 2023, weeks before Becky was left alone on that cold bathroom floor, the defendant's asking his next door neighbor, do you have any cameras that can see into my backyard? February of 2023, the month that Becky was killed. On Friday, February 10th, the defendant calls the Quincy Police Department and says that he's going through a brutal and contentious divorce. And he says, I've got to give a gun back to that crazy bitch. And he says, Hall of Fame QU football player, active in CrossFit, says, I don't feel safe around her. Let's focus on these 3 weeks. And let's start with February 13th and 14th of 2023. On February 13th, 2023, at 2:02 p.m., we know that that's the last time there was activity on the defendant's computer, last time there was any internet search on his computer, 2:02 p.m. until 1:10 a.m. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And we know that at 7:38 p.m., it's the last call on his phone until 1:32 a.m., and we'll talk about that in a minute. At 11:44 p.m., Ted Johnson, Becky's boyfriend, texts her, "I'm on my way." And we know that he arrived at the house at around midnight the next day, the 14th. And we also know that he parked his truck with that license plate and that VIN number on the back parking lot, back driveway of Becky's house. And we also know that on February 14th, at midnight, the defendant's Whoop armband loses connection. And what happens after that? What happens after his Whoop armband loses connection? For the first time, we see this video at the Quincy bus barn.
Now, on that video, it's very hard to actually see what's going on there, but I did zoom in before and it's just like, oh, okay, slightly see. You could see a bit of a bicycle going on, okay?
A bike with no reflectors, just like was on John Smith's phone. And what happens just a minute and a half after that? Well, at 12:31 a.m., we see this video at 224 South 20th Street. And just 6 minutes after that, we see this video at Taylor Hyman's house. And what do you suppose we're going to see about 15 minutes later? This video back at the Quincy bus barn. Person on a bike with no reflectors. And is it a person on a bike with no reflectors, or is it the defendant on that bike? Well, right after we see that video, the defendant's Whoop mysteriously reconnects. And right after we see that video, and right after his Whoop mysteriously reconnects, and remember, while all this is going on, this is 1:10 in the morning, Ted Johnson, at that very moment, his truck with that license plate and that VIN number are parked right behind Becky's house. What happens? The defendant goes down the rabbit hole. At 1:10 a.m., 1:10 a.m. in the morning, he starts searching all these
Oh, it's Google time. All the searches that he was making.
things. At 1:10 in the morning, right after his Whoop reconnects. And he's not just searching for license plates. There's a specific license plate that he's searching for. He's looking for 8DC J55. Now, how else does he see it unless he's in her backyard? And how else does he see it in his backyard unless he gets there? And how did he get there? He rode that bike. And how do we know he rode that bike? Because his Whoop wasn't connected when he was doing it. But if that's not enough, he looked up, how do I find the owner of a license plate in Missouri? And what does he do right after that? That's at 1:31 a.m. What does he do at 1:32 a.m.? He makes a cell phone call. Who does he call? The Missouri Department of Revenue at 1:32 in the morning. And if that's not enough, he's looking for a specific VIN number. I mean, maybe it's one thing to get a license plate number, but you gotta want that VIN number. The same VIN number that was on Ted's truck that was parked right there, right where the defendant saw it after he rode a bike there, got caught on those two videos, and he got caught on Taylor Hyman's video. He kept searching until 1:48 in the morning, over 200 searches, over 38 minutes. You know, Becky said if he didn't get his way, he might start to literally lose his mind. He started to lose his mind. Because he wasn't done. A day later, He's still searching. He's still down that rabbit hole. And on the 15th of February, there's a court order. The matter set for trial. The end is in sight for Becky. She's going to testify about all those issues, about the hidden assets, the $500,000 in hidden assets, about the custody of the boys, who's going to, is it going to be 50-50, or is the defendant going to get what he wants, 60-40, 70-30? That's going to be settled. Is she going to get kicked out of the home like the defendant wants? Is he going to have to pay her alimony or not? He didn't want to pay her the alimony that she was requesting. And what about the defendant's dad? Was he going to be around those boys unsupervised or not? That was all coming to a head. She had her witnesses subpoenaed. They were there. They were going to testify on March 3rd at 1 p.m. It's in the order. All the presenting matters were going to be heard. The end was in sight. And what did Becky say? She was super nervous for when this ends. Because if the defendant didn't get his way, he might lose his mind. February 17th, the defendant's interviewed by the GAL. Rick Zimmerman, what did he tell us? The defendant didn't want 50-50. He wanted 60-40, at least 60-40. Becky was reluctant, but would go along with 50-50. She felt like that was best for the case. Defendant, no, I want more. I want to win.
Sorry to pause it there. You guys are asking if I'm getting the hearts. I just looked on my phone, and then I can see there's like live emoji reactions. I've never seen that before. So you see, YouTube's changing a lot. There's a lot of new features, a lot of cool things happening on YouTube, which also causes glitches sometimes across the board. But yes, okay, I see it.
19th, Becky goes out for surgery. She's at the home of Brandon and Celia Gervais. We heard from them. And she doesn't come back until the 21st, but in between, the GAL report was filed. And what did the GAL say? Well, the GAL said 50-50. GAL said, defendant, you're not going to get what you want. I think it should stay the same 50-50 like Becky had agreed to, and like Becky had filed in her parenting claim. February 20th to 21st of 2023. Remember, at this point, Becky is still with the Gervais in St. Peter, in St. Louis, Missouri. And at 12:44, on the 20th, the defendant's cell phone locks. And just a minute later, his Whoop again mysteriously loses connection. And right after that, we see a video at the Quincy bus barn. Person on a bike with no reflectors. And just a minute and a half after that, we see a video at 224 South 20th Street. And 15 minutes later after that, we see a video at the bus barn. Person on a bike with no reflectors, headed north this time. And after the bus barn video, about 25 minutes later, we see another video at the bus barn. Someone on a bike with no reflectors. Defendant's Whoop. Still not connected. No activity on his laptop, no activity on his phone, not one text, not one phone call. And 15 minutes after that, person on a bike with no reflectors. You might be asking yourselves, well, why is there no video at Taylor Hyman's house? And I would remind you, Becky wasn't there that night. Becky wasn't at home that night. But mysteriously enough, at 2:11, defendant's armband, after we see the person on the bike, reconnects. And the cell phone unlocks. Becky gets home on the 21st at 11:30 that day. I'm sorry, 11:03 that day. Let's go into February 21st and 22nd. And again, let's remember, no activity on the laptop from 8:27 p.m. to 7:01 on the 22nd. No calls on his cell phone between 4:37 on the 21st and 9:29 a.m. on the 27th. 7:46, Becky texts the defendant and says, will you watch the kids the next day? We saw those messages on Our Family Wizards. And at 8 o'clock, Ted Johnson, Becky's boyfriend, brings her Kudo. He's there for about an hour and a half. And at 9:30, Ted helps Becky get into bed, kisses her on the forehead, and says goodnight. It's the last time Ted Johnson ever saw her alive. At 12:42, the defendant's whoop loses connection. What do you think is going to happen next? If you guessed that his cell phone locked, you got it right. What do you think happens next? If you guessed, will there be video from the Quincy bus barn? You got it right. 12:57. And what happens next? If you guessed, video at South 20th Street at 224, you got it right. Headed north on 20th Street, south on 20th Street, turning east on Prairie towards Becky's house. And what do you think happens after that? About 5 minutes after that. If you said, I wonder if there'll be video at the Hyman residence. There was, at 1:05 a.m.
Oh, it gives me a fright every time they do that. When they play this video and then makes that sound. Sorry about that. It's not my fault, okay? It's in the courtroom. I think everyone in the courtroom's like, oh my word, we're awake now. Yes, Stefan, timeline time. We love a timeline. So let me just silence this quickly. Sure.
Minutes after that? (1:10 a.m.) Quincy bus barn. Person on a bike with no reflectors, heading north, away from the direction of Becky's house, towards the direction of the defendant's house. What's going to happen next? If you guessed that his cell phone would unlock and the defendant's whoop would mysteriously reconnect just 6 minutes after we saw that person on the bike, you got it right. And then at 1:39, his cell phone locks again, and his whoop loses connection again. And once again, right after his cell phone locked, right after his whoop loses connection, there's a video at the Quincy bus barn of a person riding a bike with no reflectors, south on 20. And a minute and a half later, there's video at South 20th Street, 224 South 20th Street, of a person riding a bike, south on 20th Street, and once again, turning east on Prairie. And if you're asking yourself, well, in 15 minutes, is there going to be video at the Taylor Hyman residence of a person? There is. And if you're asking yourself, well, after that, is there going to be video at the bus barn again of a person on a bike with no reflectors headed north on 20th Street, away from the direction of Becky's house and towards the direction of the defendant's house? Yep, you got that one right too. Is it 2:06? There we go. And if you're asking yourself, well, how do you know that's the defendant? Once again, right after we see that person on the bike, his whoop reconnects and his phone unlocks. 14th, 20th, 21st, and 22nd. Same thing, every day. And on the days where we don't see the person on the bike, where we don't see, you know what, not a person, the days when we don't see the defendant on a bike, his whoop's fine. It's not losing connection then. The only time we see those losses, those times when the whoop isn't connected, those gaps, are when he's on a bike and he's headed to bed.
Literally, I just want to clarify. I'm not doing the distress signal right now. I'm showing it to you, okay? Because I was quiet now while doing it. This is the DV distress signal. In case you didn't know, maybe you could teach it to your kids, to whoever, because it helps. The more people know, the better. Sometimes I've heard of cases where they see someone in a car driving past, and they're like, oh my word. Take note of the license plate, call the police, tell them as much information as possible, right? Could save a life.
Becky's house. February 23rd, 2023 hit. Day Becky was murdered. On the 22nd, at 1:15, Kelly Bleefnick goes to the defendant's house. She stays there about half an hour. They have sex, and she leaves around 1:45 or 2 o'clock. Now, I understand that Kelly didn't like talking about that, and I understand. It's embarrassing to talk about those things, and I wouldn't bring it up if it wasn't important. It's not important right now. It will be important in about 10 minutes. So bear with me. Just remember,
Kelly was the neighbor of Tim, and she had a fling with him and went over on February 22nd. So the day before, because the murder happened, early hours in the morning, February 23rd, to his house for 15 minutes for a hookup.
at 1:45, 2 o'clock on the 22nd, the day before Becky was murdered, and when the defendant had to pick up his boys at 1:45, 2 o'clock, he's not picking up his boys, he's having sex with Kelly Bleefnick. February 22nd into the 23rd. 8:15 on the 22nd to 6:02 on the 23rd, no activity on his laptop. No calls on his phone between 12:32 p.m. on the 22nd and 8:01 on the 23rd. No activity on his laptop, no calls on his phone. At 7:16, Ted texts Becky. And we saw those text messages. And at 9:47, he calls Becky, and they talk for about 26 minutes. And at 12:36, the defendant's whoop loses connection. And at 12:38, his cell phone locks. 12:53, Becky's on Facebook. And at 12:55, we see a video again of the defendant riding that blue bike with no reflector down 20th Street towards Becky's house. And a minute and a half after that, we see the video.
Sorry to pause again. She did try to call for help. She had tried to call 911, and they put a longer number, but it's 911 in general. I can't remember. It was like 911, 126, something like that. But anyway, she had tried to call, but it seemed like the phone was knocked out of her hand, and the phone was found behind the door, out of her reach. And the forensic pathologist said that she was shot 14 times, but where and how she was shot means that she was paralyzed because one of the bullets hit her spine and one went through her lung, and so it would have made breathing difficult, and she was paralyzed, couldn't defend herself then, and would have bled to death. So they asked if it would have been painful, and he said yes, the forensic pathologist. So yes.
At 224 South 20th Street, of the defendant riding that same blue bike that he bought on Facebook and headed south on 20th and turning east on Prairie towards Becky's home. He goes to Becky's house, climbs up that chair, he climbs onto the pergola, he climbs onto the roof, and he goes past these windows, he goes past these windows, and he goes to this window, the window that he knows goes to a bedroom that's empty, because the little boy who sleeps in that room is asleep at his house at that moment. The random burglar just got that lucky. The random burglar went past 4 other entry points, get to an entry point all the way across on the other side. He pries open that window, crawls through the window. Becky hears the noise, tries to slam her door shut, The defendant kicks in that door, breaks in that door, and Becky's trying to dial 91126, and the phone falls out of her hand because he breaks in that door, knocking the phone out of her hand, and it's found right there. And Becky runs into the bathroom, and she turns around, and she falls to the ground, and the defendant looks down at her, and she looks up at him, and he points a gun down at her, and he pulls the trigger again, and again, and again, and again. And he leaves her like that. And at 1:12 a.m. he runs away. And while Becky is still in that dark, cold bathroom, completely alone, she can't move from the waist down because her spinal cord's been hit. She can't breathe because one of her lungs has been punctured. She's bleeding internally for minutes as she slowly and agonizingly bleeds to death. While that's going on, she's surrounded by evidence of the crime. She's surrounded by pieces of a plastic bag that the defendant used in an attempt to make a homemade silencer, in an attempt to try to catch those shell casings that are projected from the gun. And the defendant's DNA is under the fingernails of her left hand, the same hand that she used to wear a wedding ring on when she promised to love and honor the defendant. That hand was no protection from the bullets that he fired at her. Surrounded by the 8 shell casings that exactly matched the shell casings that were at the defendant's house. Not the same type of gun, not the same type of ammunition, not the same brand of gun, the exact same fingerprint on all those shell casings and all those shell casings in his basement. And while Becky is slowly dying.
I'm just gonna pause it for a second here. Amy K says, wish there was a death penalty in this case, right? Shindog City, in my community, we're a very sensitive community. So yes, we need trigger warnings. There's lots of traumatized people here, and you do need a trigger warning. So that's like, sorry, I'm not attacking you, okay? I'm just gonna make a statement. It's kind of old school thinking to be like, you don't need a trigger warning, you know? It's like very, yes, we want to trigger, this is a trigger bunny. And it's okay to have a trigger warning, because some things can be triggering. There's lots of DV survivors in the house here, and sometimes things can be triggering. So over here we give trigger warnings. We care very much about mental health. If you don't like trigger warnings, just don't be triggered by the trigger warning. Then it's horror hog for you. Okay, let's continue on. I know this is hard to listen to, but here we go.
The defendant is riding that blue bike with no reflectors, furiously home, pedaling furiously away from what he just did, running away and facing what he did. And after he got rid of the gun, and the clothes, and the evidence of his crime, or almost all the evidence of his crime, his whoop reconnects, and his cell phone unlocks. The defendant didn't commit further crime, but his mistakes kept going into that morning. On the morning of the 23rd, between 7:30 and 9:30 a.m., Amy Schmiedeskamp told me that she saw the defendant bring a little Thai soup over to his father's house. Now remember, the defendant's father, had no unsupervised contact with those boys for over 2 years. They hadn't been over there. Amy Schmiedeskamp said she hadn't seen the boys over there for 2 years. Why does he bring a little Thai soup over there unless he knows that that's not going to be a problem for him anymore? Unless he knows what nobody else knows at that point, that at 7:30 in the morning, Becky's body is still less than a block away from where he's dropping off that little Thai soup. Because he knows that he's not going to be around to put up a fight now. I'm going to get what I want. My dad's going to be able to have unsupervised contact because Becky's dead, because I killed her. Is Amy Schmiedeskamp lying about what she saw? And at 11:51 a.m., the defendant calls St. Peter's School and says, don't let the boys walk home. I'm going to be there to pick them up. Don't let them walk home. Roberta Hudson, the school secretary, said that was unusual, that he had never done that before. Well, what was different on the 23rd? Why didn't he want the boys to walk home? Could it be because he knew that the evidence of his crime was waiting to be discovered, and he didn't want his boys to walk in and see their mother shot 14 times on the bathroom floor? He gets to St. Peter's School an hour early to pick up the boys, and Roberta Hudson said that was unusual. There were no other parents waiting that early. And I would remind you, the day before when he was picking up the boys, what was he doing at 1:47? He wasn't getting to school that early, he was doing something else. So what's different about the 23rd? Well, what was different is he didn't want those boys walking home, walking into that house and seeing what he did.
Oh yes, the day before he wasn't picking up the kids from school an hour early. He was with that neighbor, but for 15 minutes. But yes, Janet says, from experience, DV isn't always physical. It can be mental too. You start to believe you are crazy. That goes under that umbrella called coercive control, which includes gaslighting. You know, when people say narcissism, yes, that can go with it too, but it's the entitlement. It's gaslighting. It's coercive control. And yeah, it can start as mental and emotional torture and then eventually escalate to become physical. So that is true. Yes, Janet.
Also remember, he called the school. We'll come back to that in just a minute. At 2:47, he picks up the boys, and only after he picks up the boys, only after he picks them up and he's sure that it's not going to be an issue, only after that does he text Becky's dad and now says, you know what, now I'm really concerned. I wasn't concerned at 11:51. I didn't text you then. I wasn't concerned at 1:47 when I was sitting in the parking lot for an hour. Didn't text you then to say, hey, maybe check on Becky because I'm here at the parking lot an hour early. Didn't do that then. He waited until the boys were with him. Then he texted Becky's dad. And when Becky's dad tries to call him, just 3 minutes later, he doesn't answer. Because he wants somebody, he needs somebody to go into the house now. He needs somebody to find her body. At 3:30, Becky's father does just that. And when the defendant finally does call that phone back at 4:14, what does he do? He lies. He tells Becky's mom, the school called me that Becky wasn't there, so I came to the school to pick up the boys. That's not what happened. Why did he lie? Is Rolla making that up? No, Rolla told us exactly what she heard. She said, the defendant said on the phone, the school called me, and I only went to the school because the school said Becky wasn't there. That's not what happened. We know he called the school. Why did he lie? And on the 27th, just 4 days after Becky was brutally executed, we find a bicycle. Not down by the river, not on the east end of town, not on the north end of town, not on the south end of town, not 6 blocks away from the defendant's house, not 4 blocks, not 3 blocks, not 2 blocks, not even a block away, half a block away from the defendant's residence, we find that blue bicycle with no reflectors. And we know that's important because on the left we saw Kelby's ride, Zach Demas's ride, where he rode that bike with the reflectors on. We saw those reflectors light up, and we didn't see that on the 14th, the 21st, the 22nd, or the 23rd. That's how we know that's the bike. The defense will say, well, DNA is not on it. Okay, fair enough. That bike was outside for 4 days. We don't know what happened to it in those 4 days. We don't know who else touched it. We don't. But what we do know is that that's the bike the defendant was riding because he got it off Facebook. It was on his phone under a John Smith burner account, just like he bought that black Mongoose bike that was in his garage. They were set at the same height, less than a centimeter apart. Then on March 1st, we searched the defendant's house, and what do we find? We find in his bedroom an empty gun safe. An empty gun safe. Where's the gun? We know that there was purchase history for an SR9, Ruger SR9, that the defendant bought. We didn't find that when we searched. We know that Becky wanted a CZ75. Didn't find that when we searched. In fact, the only gun we found was that Ruger LCS that he was supposed to give to Becky, and he never did. And where did we find it? We found it downstairs in a gun safe. If you're going to use a gun for personal protection, and you have a quick access gun safe, you store the gun there. But he didn't. The handgun for personal protection was downstairs, in a lock safe downstairs, and not in the empty, interestingly enough, gun safe in his bedroom. We talked about the black mongoose spike, and in his house we also found these ALDI garbage bags, ALDI grocery bags, and that crowbar, and those shell casings. Again, remember, all around Becky's body were pieces of a plastic bag, pieces of a plastic bag that the Illinois State Police Crime Lab, to be fair, they said it was inconclusive, but I'm not a scientist. All they can say is that that's inconclusive but consistent. Okay. I guess maybe it's good that I'm not a scientist, because that's a match. And the tool marks that were left on that window that the crime lab analyzed with this pry bar. And what did they say about the tool marks and the crowbar? There were microscopic consistencies between the two of them. She had to call it inconclusive because she couldn't exactly replicate the manner that tool marks were made, but there were microscopic consistencies. It was inconclusive, but consistent. Just like that is inconclusive, but consistent. And remember, on those pieces of plastic bag, there was DNA. And Ted Johnson, in case you're thinking, well, maybe Ted Johnson had something to do with it, Ted Johnson was excluded. In fact, Ted Johnson's DNA wasn't found in the house. It wasn't there. But the defendant couldn't be excluded. In fact, it was 8 times more likely that it was his DNA on that piece of plastic than 2 unrelated individuals. 8 times. And under Becky's fingernails of that left hand, 3 times more likely it was the defendant or one of the boys. But also remember, she hadn't been around the boys since she left for surgery on the 19th. She had to scrub in for surgery. You have to clean yourself off for surgery. So, boys' DNA under fingernails? The defendant's DNA under her fingernails. And the shell casing. The 8 shell casings that were around Becky's body, and the 27 shell casings that we found in his basement. And the exact match. Defense may say, well, we don't have any fingerprints. Yeah, we do. These are the fingerprints. The same gun fired all those bullets. Not the same brand, not the same model, the exact same gun fired every one of those bullets. The defense may say that this case is circumstantial. And you may be thinking in your mind, well, it's a circumstantial case. But the key word in circumstantial evidence isn't circumstantial, it's evidence. Circumstantial evidence is evidence. It's proof of facts or circumstances which give rise to a reasonable inference of other facts which tend to show the guilt or the innocence of the defendant. Let me put it to you like this. There's an old game show that I used to watch. I don't know if it's on anymore. You spin the wheel and you pick letters. I think it's called Wheel of Fortune. I don't know if it's still on, but let's play Wheel of Fortune. Are you convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that says happy birthday? Well, each letter is another piece of the puzzle that you use to solve it. And just like you don't have to have every letter to be convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that that says happy birthday, you don't have to have every piece of the puzzle. You don't have to have the gun to convict him of murder. You don't have to have a confession to convict someone of murder. You don't have to have an eyewitness to convict someone of murder. Those are nice letters to have, but you can solve it without it. So let's take a few minutes to go through the circumstantial evidence in this case. Sarah Riley, Sarah Murphy, Melissa Young, Nicole Bateman, Christine Moore, Amber Whitler, Christine Mandel, Becky Spots, Gary Collins. All these people told us the same thing. I'm not going to go through all their statements again. All these people told us that Becky was scared of the defendant, that she thought he was going to do something to her, and that she thought if anything ever happened to her, it'd be the defendant that did it. Every one of them. They didn't say it was somebody else. They didn't say it was Ted Johnson. They didn't say she's scared of a random prowler. They said she's scared of the defendant. Every one of them. And frankly, does it matter how long ago she said it? She was scared for 2 years. And she had every reason to be scared for those 2 years. What about motive? Well, we know that the defendant's father could have no contact with the kids, and we know the defendant didn't like that. Child custody, we know the defendant didn't want 50-50, he wanted 60-40, 70-30. Maintenance, alimony, we know they disagreed about that. In his letter just a month before she was murdered, I'll pay you $750. We saw the calculations that they filed. Becky thought she should get at least twice that. The child support, he didn't want to pay any child support. And the hidden assets. We heard from Becky's attorney that she thought there were almost $500,000 in hidden assets. And we do know that the defendant told Becky, according to one of her friends, you'll be dead before you get my money. The missing CZ-75, they didn't agree about that. The marital home, the defendant wanted to kick her out of the place that she had lived with her 3 boys for the 2 years since he had moved out and filed for divorce. He wanted to kick her out. You got 60 days to find a new place to live. And we know that the divorce hearing date was coming up. In fact, just a week after she was murdered was when it was scheduled to start. The witnesses were subpoenaed. Becky was going to testify. It was all lined up. It was in an order. It was ready to go. But we never got to have that hearing. Becky never got to have her day in court. And who benefits from that? In the entire world, who benefited from not having to have that divorce hearing? One person. It sits right there. The GAL report. GAL said 50-50. Wasn't what the defendant wanted. He thought he was going to lose. And what did Becky say? If he doesn't get his way, he might literally lose his mind. The witnesses were subpoenaed. She was going to testify. It was all set up. Then in January, the defendant asked Bradley Eman about those cameras in his backyard. The defendant was thinking then, how am I going to get away with this? February 10th, he calls her a crazy bitch and says he's scared of her. And when we search his house, we can't find that Ruger SR9 that we know that he bought. It's also a 9mm. February 14th, he goes down the rabbit hole of the Ted Johnson searches. He starts to become more and more unhinged. He's looking for that license plate that at that exact time was parked in Becky's driveway. He looks for that exact VIN number. He calls the Department of Revenue at 1:32 in the morning. I ask you, are those the actions of someone? Which they We have the video on the bus barn and how that correlates with everything. We have the video from 224 South 20th Street. We have the video from the Hyman house. But not just that, we know that after Becky's murder, there were no more midnight bike rides with a bike with no reflectors. And we know that after Becky's murder, there were no more midnight bike rides at 224 South 20th Street. And Taylor Hyman said after Becky's murder, there were no more issues in the driveway there either. The John Smith Facebook account, we've talked about that. Mike Blazing, he sold that blue bike to a tall, athletic white man. John Smith, who, can we all agree, is a defendant. It was on his phone. We saw the messages where John Smith described himself. No reflectors on that bike. The bike was found less than half a block from the defendant's house. The bike height seat was almost exactly the same, less than half a centimeter away from the bike that we found in the defendant's garage, that he also bought on Facebook. These rides occurred in the middle of the night in February. And is there any other motive to kill Becky? This wasn't a sexual assault. This wasn't a burglary. Nothing was missing. Her purse was there. Her credit cards were there. Her laptop was there. Her checkbook was there. Nothing was missing. Random burglar breaks into the house and doesn't steal anything? The next morning, the little type soup. He's delivering a little type soup to his father when nobody knows that Becky's dead except for the person that killed her. He calls St. Peter's at 11:51 when nobody knows that Becky's dead except for the person that killed her. He arrives an hour later when nobody knows that Becky's dead except for the person that killed her. And that's important because the day before when he was picking up the boys, he wasn't there an hour early. He was doing something else. He texts her dad not at 11:51, not at 1:47 when he's sitting in his car alone for an hour waiting for the boys, not until after he picks up the boys. And then, after he texts Becky's dad, he lies to her mom. The manner of entry, it was climbing up that wall. It wasn't done by a non-athletic person. It's an athletic means of entry, and the defendant is athletic. He was involved in CrossFit. He was a former QU football player, Hall of Fame player, in fact. The path of entry. Does it point to anyone else? It points to someone who knows who's in that house and who's not in that house. They go past 4 other points of entry, past 4 other windows, and goes into the first window, but they know nobody's there because the little boy who slept in that room was sleeping in his house at that exact time. Then they chase Becky down. A random burglar breaks into the house, finds a gun, I guess, or brings a gun that somehow had shell casings in the defendant's house. Less about that later. Finds that gun, or brings it, breaks in, then chases Becky down, kicks in the door, and then stands over her and pulls the trigger 14 times? A random prowler does that? It's a crime of passion. That's somebody who's mad. That's somebody who wants that person dead. It's not just a murder, that's an execution. The tool marks on the window. The crowbar in his home. Inconclusive, but consistent, microscopic consistencies. The ALDI bag pieces and the ALDI bags in his home. Consistent. I'll show you the picture again, but you know. And on those ALDI bag pieces, the defendant's DNA. Not Ted Johnson, not somebody else, the defendant's DNA. 8 times more likely. And underneath her fingernails, the defendant's DNA. 3 times more likely. The empty handgun safe in his house. And there's no handgun safe at Becky's house. Assume for a moment that it's a random prowler. Does he get the gun from Becky's house? Becky doesn't have a gun. She's been asking for a gun for 2 years. She wants her gun back. She never gets it back. She didn't even have a handgun safe. Ammunition, nothing. And of course, we don't know where that CZ-75 was, and we don't know where the Ruger is that the defendant bought. The 8 shell casings at the scene, and the 27 shell casings in his basement, all fired by the exact same gun. Again, I hate to say it again, but not the same brand of gun, not the same type of gun. The same gun fired every one of those 35 shots. Those 35 shell casings were fired by the same gun. The gun that killed Becky fired the shell casings in the defendant's house. And of course, we know that there was no laptop activity on his laptop at these times when we see these bike rides. And there was no cell phone activity at the time that we see these bike rides. And that his cell phone was locked every time we see these bike rides. And that the Whoop data all shows that his Whoop was disconnected every time we see this bike ride. Every time. All it would take is one phone call, one text message, one you up, one how you doing, one Google search. And we know it couldn't have been him, but not one. Every time we see that person on the bike, we don't have cell phone activity, we don't have computer activity, and his Whoop is mysteriously and coincidentally disconnected. In fact, on that second bike, the third day, the 22nd, when there were 2 separate rides, it connected and disconnected after the first ride, and connected and disconnected after the second ride. What more do you need to see? But okay, let's talk about his searches. How to force open my door with a crowbar. How was Becky's window forced open? With a crowbar. Can I force open my door with a crowbar if I lock myself out? How was her window forced open? How many cops in Quincy, Illinois? Respectfully, enough to catch him. How to make a homemade pistol silencer? None of the neighbors reported hearing a shot. And he's looking up how to make a homemade pistol silencer. Average Quincy, Illinois Police Department response time? How long do I have to get away? How can I check if a gun is registered to me? Are the police going to be able to figure out what guns I own and if they're missing? They're never missing guns. Does my Whoop record the exact times I wear it? The Whoop data that shows that he was the person on that bike making those rides. Can you just wash off gunpowder residue? How do I hide the evidence of my crimes? Does my Whoop catch up when I'm not wearing it? Are the police going to be able to catch me? Can you find out what guns are registered to your name? Are the police going to be able to catch me? How to clean gunpowder off your hands? Are the police going to be able to catch me? Can you identify if a shotgun shell was shot out of a specific shotgun? What did we learn over the last 7 days about shell casings? Fingerprint. He was on websites for improvised silencers. He was on websites for how to open windows from the outside, just like Becky's window was forced open. How to unlock privacy locks. He was on websites for easy lock picking tricks. He was on websites for how to use a crowbar to open a door. He was on websites for can gunshot residue be washed off or wiped off. He was on a website that says gunshot powder residue not always a smoking gun. Well, we know that's true. We learned that over the last 7 days, that after 6 hours, there's really no point. Are shotgun rounds traceable? We learned the answer to handgun rounds. Every piece of evidence, every single witness points to one person and one person alone. Nothing you have seen or heard over the past 7 days shows that anyone other than the defendant committed this brutal and heinous crime. Nothing you have seen or heard over the past 7 days shows that anyone else fired those 14 bullets into Becky's body. Nothing you have heard or seen over the last 7 days shows that anyone else had a motive to kill Becky. In fact, only the defendant had a motive to kill, to execute Becky. The divorce was coming up. He thought he was going to lose. He thought he wasn't going to get what he wanted. And just like Becky predicted, he literally lost his mind. Only the defendant had the matching shell casings in his basement. Shell casings in the basement that were fired by the exact same gun that shot and killed Becky. The same fingerprint, if you will, on the shell casings surrounding Becky's body and the shell casings in his basement. The same fingerprint. The exact same gun. And only the defendant had those strange coincidental gaps on his Whoop armband. 1,478,411, I think, second by second by second by second. And the only times we heard about any gaps, the only times, are when somebody's riding that bike. Not somebody, when the defendant was riding that bike. And the only time we heard about those gaps are when the defendant rode that bike to Becky's house. And the only time we heard about those gaps are when he climbed up to her window and he pried open that window. And the only time we heard about those gaps are when he chased Becky down the hall, broke open the door, and knocked the phone out of her hands. And the only time we heard about those gaps are when he followed Becky into the bathroom and she fell to the ground. And he looked down at her and he looked her in the eyes and she looked up at him. And he pointed the gun down at her and he pulled the trigger once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, 14 times. Only the defendant is to blame for executing Becky. And in this case, there can be only one verdict. Sign the verdict form that finds him guilty of home invasion. Sign the verdict form that finds him guilty of first-degree murder. Sign the verdict form that says that he used a firearm to commit that offense. There can be only one verdict. One verdict that the evidence supports. One verdict that the law requires. And one verdict that justice demands. Find the defendant guilty.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Before we start with the defendant's closing statement, I'm going to let everybody take a break. So we're going to take a 20-minute recess so everybody...
Okay, should we just watch the 20-minute recess, you guys? As if we're going to skip forward now. So that's at 1:41, so let's go to 2 hours. Ah, there we go. Sorry, I want to find it exactly when they start. Oh, they took a shorter break than 20 minutes. Okay. Bro. Okay. Are we ready for the defense's closing arguments? By the way, I am monitoring everything on social media, KHQA on Facebook, because they might live stream the verdict, maybe. I'm not sure. We'll have a look. I'm just looking there. And then also I'm looking at hashtag Bliefnick trial. So if you do like this video and share it, use the hashtag Bliefnick trial. You can see the spelling in the title of the video. And also Grizzly True Crime, so that you can it can be found easily on social media. So there's nothing happening right now. The jury's been deliberating for almost 3 hours. Okay, in 10 minutes' time, it'll be 3 hours since they've been deliberating. We are watching the closing arguments that took place today. And this case is about Rebecca Bliefnick, who was shot 14 times in her home on February 23rd, 2023. And it was in the early hours of the morning, just after 1 a.m. The suspect, the person who was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of home invasion, is Timothy Bliefnick, her estranged husband. They were going through a contentious divorce and custody battle. The reason that it could be 2 counts of first-degree murder is not because it's 2 people or 1 person was murdered, is because in some states they say murder while attempting to commit a felony counts as 1 count, and then the other count would be premeditation and malice, which is what the circumstantial evidence seems to point to. So what we're doing now in this stream, we summarized everything that happened yesterday because the footage is always uploaded afterwards. It's not a trial that's been live streamed. Today is the first time that KHQA actually live streamed the closing arguments. I was waiting for Muddy River News to upload it because it's much better quality. It's HD 1080p instead of 360 or 720p. We like high quality over here and an audio boost. Okay, so that's what we're doing. We are watching the closing arguments from earlier today while the jury deliberates. I'm not sure if we'll get a verdict today. Of course, none of us know, but I am keeping an eye on it. And we will see what they say. If there's any news, I will let you know. Okay, so let's watch the defense's closing arguments now.
All right, 20 minutes, and we'll start with Ms. Schnock's closing. We'll be in recess. We are back on the record on 23 CF 170, People versus Timothy Bliefnick. Mr. Bliefnick is present in court along with his attorney, Ms. Casey Schnock. People are present by Assistant State's Attorney Josh Jones and Laura Keck. And we are ready for the defendant's closing argument. And if you could bring in the jury, please.
You may be seated.
Ms. Schnock, you may be heard.
Thank you. May it please the court, counsel, ladies and gentlemen. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt. What a term that is. We've heard a lot about proof beyond a reasonable doubt since last Monday. We heard proof beyond a reasonable doubt when we were picking the jury. We heard about proof beyond a reasonable doubt during our opening statements, and you're hearing about proof beyond a reasonable doubt now. And you're hearing about it over and over, time and time again, because it's important. It is an important principle of law. I would suggest to you probably one of the most important principles of law that you will consider in your deliberations today. Beyond a reasonable doubt is a high burden. It is a very high burden. It is a monumental burden. And it is a high burden, and it is done so because our founding fathers believed that it was better that 100 people guilty go free than 1 innocent person be convicted. Now, as you have heard time and time again, that burden of proof is not on me. That burden of proof is not on Tim. That burden of proof is on the state and the state alone. And because the burden of proof is on the state and the burden of proof is not on me, this is the last time that I will get to address you during the course of this trial. If Mr. Jones wants to take another stab at you at rebuttal, that's his prerogative, but this is the last time that I will get to address any of it. So I would like to take this moment to thank all of you for your patience. I thank you, Megan thanks you, and Tim thanks you for your patience. You were all asked if you could handle deciding a case like this. You all said that you believed that you could, and so we thank you for your attention to your service. And we've all been here a long time. I don't know about you, but I'm tired, so I'm going to get right to the point here. When you were selected, you were asked by the court, you were asked by Mr. Jones, and you were asked by myself if you would follow the law. You all promised that you would follow the law. You promised to follow the law if you didn't like it, and you promised to follow the law even if you didn't agree with it. And I am going to ask you that again right now, and I'm going to ask you that on behalf of Tim, that you follow the law. Remember your promise and remember that oath. One of the first things that Judge Adrian is going to tell you when Mr. Jones and I are done addressing you is he is going to read the law to you. Sympathy should not enter in your deliberations. You will not hear anything from the judge that sympathy is a factor in any of this. As a matter of
Her name is Miss Schnock. Could be a Mishnaki.
fact, you will be told that sympathy should not enter in your deliberations, and it is not something that should be considered by you when you go back into that jury room. We all feel sorry for Becky, and we all feel sorry for her family. This is sad. When somebody dies, it's sad. When somebody dies with kids, it's sad. When somebody dies tragically, it's sad. But we're not here to decide if this is sad. We're not here to prey on your sympathy. Sympathy has its place. It has its place in the theater, but it doesn't have its place in a courtroom, and it doesn't have a place in your deliberations. And I say that because sympathy is not evidence, and it cannot be considered by you, and the judge will tell you that. And the reason that I'm addressing that right now is because when you listen to the state's opening statement, and when you listen to their closing argument, both of which are not evidence, may I add, it is dripping with sympathy. It is lacking in any hard evidence. So when Mr. Jones talked to you about Becky's death and the manner in which he thinks it occurred, that should not enter in your deliberations. And I say that because it is simply a cry for sympathy because the case is lacking substantive evidence. The state is asking you to do something today. They want something from you. They want you to take away the presumption of innocence that all defendants enjoy, that Tim enjoys as he sits here right now, that he enjoyed every single day since this case was brought against him. He will carry that presumption of innocence with him unless and until all of you are convinced that the state has proven their case beyond a reasonable doubt. But as he sits here today, he is presumed innocent as a matter of law. All of you promised that you agreed to that and that you would accept that. Because Tim carries the presumption of innocence with him, and the burden of proof is not on me and it's not on Tim, he doesn't have to prove anything in this case. He does not have to prove he's innocent. He does not have to prove that he is not guilty. He does not have to prove alternative theories. This is the state's burden. It's not mine and it's not Tim's. And in order for you to take away that presumption of innocence away from Tim, you all need to be convinced that the state has given you good, solid, credible evidence that convinces all of you that each and every element of that offense has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. I would submit to you that beyond a reasonable doubt is not in conclusions, and it is not maybes. And I cannot stress this next proposition to you enough. Motive is not an element of the offense of murder. You have heard a lot about motive. You have heard evidence or lack of evidence about motive, but you are not going to be given an instruction about motive. The judge isn't going to tell you to consider motive. The judge isn't going to tell you that it is an element of the offense that has to be proven. Motive is rhetoric and is not something that should be considered in your deliberations. Mr. Jones has talked a lot about the manner in which Becky died. The fact that she won't have parenting time with her kids, that she won't receive alimony, and that she won't receive child support. But ask yourself, what does that prove in this case? The answer is nothing. It proves nothing. It proves that they were getting divorced. It proves that there were court orders entered. And all it is a request for sympathy. It does not prove anything. It certainly doesn't prove that Tim murdered her. We heard from her friends. We've heard from Becky's family members. We've heard from co-workers. They all got on the stand and they testified that sometime after the time of filing, at this point going back to 2021 now, Becky said something to the effect of it, if anything happens to me, look at Tim. We heard about this from friends, from work colleagues, from people that knew Tim, from people that didn't know Tim, from people that hadn't seen Tim in years, from people that took Becky's side in the divorce. But regardless of who these people are, where they came from, or when they heard what they heard, I want you to join in their request. I ask you, look at Tim. Look at Tim right now and ask yourself, what does the evidence prove? Look at Tim and ask yourself, what hasn't been proven? Look at Tim and ask yourself, what is the lack of evidence here? What have we been shown? What evidence has been presented? And what, if anything, does that prove to sustain the state's burden of proof? I suggest and I submit to you that the state has come up woefully short in their quest to prove Tim guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, we've talked about DNA. You heard about transference of DNA. You heard about how DNA of one person could get into the home of another person. And the example was the backpack. If I send my son over to Grandma and Grandpa's with a backpack, my DNA could end up at Grandma and Grandpa's, even though I had never actually been in the house. You heard about all of the evidence that was collected, all of the swabs that were done. They did DNA collection and testing on the chair outside that they believed Tim used to shimmy up the side of the house, onto the pergola, onto the roof. They did not find any DNA on any of the shell casings that you heard about. They did not find any of Tim's DNA on the bike that they think he rode to commit this crime. They swabbed his car for DNA evidence. They found nothing. There is no DNA with any reasonable degree of scientific certainty that can link Tim to this crime. None. They did their best. You heard from all of the police officers involved in this and all of the efforts that they went through to collect evidence, and they did not find anything with Tim's DNA on it that can connect him to this crime. You didn't hear about any fingerprint evidence. You did not hear about any hair or fiber samples being collected and tested as evidence. They wanted to make a big deal about the length of his hair, but didn't find any hair anywhere that they looked. You heard about all of the gloves that were taken, that were tested, that nothing was found on. You heard about the nearly 800 tons of trash that were sifted through, that nothing was found. You heard about the ALDI bag, the grocery bag that the state thinks Tim used as a silencer that can't be matched to Tim. You don't have a weapon. You have ballistics that are subject to human error, and that their own expert told you are not exact reproductions. Now, additionally, the elephant in the room, the Google searches. The state did not tell you when those were done, and they cannot tell you when those searches were done, and they cannot tell you who did those searches. If those searches took place before Becky's death, I would admit it should be considered by you for whatever that's worth. But they can't tell you that. Nobody can tell you that, and you can't guess. If these searches took place after Becky's death, then the searches should indicate that it's nothing more than Tim looking into the investigation like half of the town did, and following the investigation as the news allowed us to follow the evidence. But they can't tell us when those searches were done, and it's not my job to tell you or prove to you when those were done. These searches indicate nothing more than somebody looking on the internet. I think it's logical to do if something like this were to happen to your family. But the state wants you, each and every one of you, to speculate, and the state wants each and every one of you to guess when those searches took place. And the judge is going to tell you that you can't guess, that you can't speculate. And if you have to guess, or if you have to speculate, I submit to all of you that that is not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. If you are left guessing or wondering, the state has not met its burden of proof. And guessing is not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. The state has not provided you any witnesses. I think their first 3 witnesses and all of the neighbors said they didn't hear anything. They didn't see anything. They didn't see Tim in the area of the 22nd or the 23rd. They didn't have anything on their home surveillance video. Nothing. Nobody can put Tim in that area. There's no reliable video. We've heard ad nauseum of the efforts that Quincy Police Department went going door to door, business to business, looking for surveillance video to possibly solve this crime. Even Mr. Jones and his own witnesses agreed. You can't tell who's in that video. You don't know if this is a man or a woman. We don't know what race they are. We don't know where they're going. We don't know where they're coming from. We don't even know if this is the same person in each video, folks. And that leaves you guessing. And if you have to guess who is in that video, and if you have to speculate who is in that video, what I submit to you is that video is not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. If you look at that video, you don't see whoever that is carrying a crowbar. You don't see whoever that is carrying a gun. And you certainly don't see long, brown, flowing hair anywhere in those videos. There is no identification, and there is no proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Now I want to talk about the crowbar and the pry marks. I believe Emily Pizzella told you that there were several crowbars that were found at Tim's residence. They went through his house top to bottom, went through his car too. He told them where everything was. During Mr. Jones' opening statement, he told you that that crowbar was a match. We had our witness in court yesterday. She told you that that crowbar was inconclusive as the tool that made those marks. She could not say with any reasonable degree of scientific certainty whether or not that crowbar was or wasn't used in the commission of this crime. That leaves you with an inconclusive lab result. Inconclusive results, folks, is not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. That leaves you guessing and that leaves you speculating, and you cannot do that. That crowbar, nobody can say one way or another if that crowbar opened that window, and that is not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. They also found a shoe print left right by the window that the state wants you to believe that Tim pried open with a crowbar that they can't link to the crime and left that shoe print. Emily Pizzella told us that there were two partial footprints, one on the end table right below the window, and then the one on the floor that we've all heard about and saw in some of the state's pictures. You heard about all of the shoes that they took from Tim's residence. They had access to every single one of Tim's shoes. They took the shoes off of him that he was wearing in the middle of Hampshire Street. They took pictures of his shoes the night that he was murdered. They took pictures of Ted Johnson's shoes, and the only thing that all of that came to was that Tim's shoes were excluded as making that footprint. Excluded. There are no footprints, no shoes, no nothing that can link that print to Tim Bliefnick in any way, shape, or form. That wasn't inconclusive, that was excluded. There has been literally no evidence in this case, folks, that Tim committed this crime. There's been a lot of evidence of motive, but not a lot of evidence that a crime was committed. And that's in spite of the good work of Quincy Police Department, especially Emily Pizzella. You heard from her and other officers, and they told you how many hours they spent going through Becky's house, searching the outside of Becky's house. I think Emily said she even went back to Becky's house and so that she could try to find more evidence. Emily was involved in searching Tim's house, top to bottom, inside and outside, garages, trash. They found nothing. They went door to door, house to house, business to business. They found nothing. They collected swabs and samples, and they secured every single piece of evidence, and they sent everything off to the crime lab for testing that they possibly could. And in our opinion, their hard work and the lab's hard work clearly exonerates Tim. In addition, and I think this is important to point out to you, that there was a prowler next door to Becky's literally 24 hours beforehand, and nobody bothered looking into that. And you heard that from Taylor Hyman, who lives right next door to Becky. He's the one that told you the only reason he even had security cameras to begin with is because he had people breaking into his cars. He told you that a week before, they had somebody trying to break into their car. He told you that they posted it on social media. He told you that him and his wife said, hey guys, he's back. Nothing about Tim Bliefnick being in his driveway. It was the prowler, as the Hymans told you. Now let's look a little bit further into the state's theory of the case. When you watch those videos, and when you look at who is on that bike, you cannot say with any degree of certainty that that is Tim. Where's the crowbar? Where's the gun? You don't see any of that. The theory is that Tim took the crowbar and the gun from his house to Becky's house and back. But even Mr. Jones agrees that that's not an identifiable individual on that video. And that's not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. As far as that bike is concerned, they want you to believe that he rode this mystery bicycle from his house at 16th and Hampshire to her house at 25th and Kentucky Road. But the evidence really is that somebody was riding a bike by the bus barn at 20th and Hampshire, and somebody was riding a bike at 20th and Prairie. But that's hardly in the neighborhood of Tim's house, and it certainly isn't in the neighborhood of Becky's house. We've looked at every residential camera, every business camera, every security camera between Tim's house and Becky's house, and have found nothing but the short blurs of somebody who is clearly not Tim riding a bicycle. That is not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Following that theory is that Tim broke into his own home, doing it the most difficult way possible. Common sense, and none of you are required to check your common sense at the door, tells us that if you're going to break into your own home, you're going to do it the easiest way possible and not the most difficult. You're not going to climb up a chair and shimmy up the side of the house and go from a pergola to a roof and walk past your wife's bedroom window in the process. It doesn't make sense. The next thing that you need to consider is that in the opening statement that the state gave you, they told you that the crowbar matched the pry marks. Now you've heard scientific evidence that shows that the crowbar and the pry marks do not match, and they are at best inconclusive. Now I want to talk about the shoe print, and I'm almost done, folks, so please bear with me, but this is important. The state's theory is that the killer broke through that bedroom window and left a shoe print on the carpet. The police cut that shoe print out, and they sent it in for analysis. And that shoe print that was sent in for analysis was compared to the shoes for Tim, and it's not Tim's shoe. It wasn't inconclusive, it was excluded. Now, Mr. Jones wants to submit that that only eliminates Tim's shoe. But they took all of his shoes and they didn't even bother testing the remaining shoes, or anybody else's shoes for that matter. Since it's the state's burden of proof and they cannot bother to test the remaining shoes, I think that in and of itself should create reasonable doubt in your mind. I also think the fact that Mr. Jones wants to turn this into a game show should tell you what he thinks about his evidence and that it is lacking substance. What I submit to you is if the killer went through that window and left that shoe print, which I can almost certainly concede that happened, and the state appears to agree with that shoe print is not Tim's, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is reasonable doubt. Now let's follow through. The state can't give you the murder weapon. They can't give you any DNA that sufficiently links him to this crime. They have been unable to produce any hair or fiber samples. You've heard nothing about any gunshot residue tests that were offered to Tim, and you won't hear anything about that. And the state wants you to believe that Tim did all of this while his 13-year-old, his 10-year-old, and his 5-year-old were home alone in his care at his house, and that he did all of this in order to avoid paying child support and alimony. But the fact of the matter is, Tim had been paying child support and he had been paying alimony, and he was willing to continue to pay alimony. He was willing to continue to help the boys out financially. You saw the letter. He wasn't trying to get out of his responsibility. You saw the settlement letter. And you also heard from the guardian ad litem, Rick Zimmerman, who is an important person in all of this because he really truly is the one independent person who testified to anything. He was appointed in the divorce to protect the best interest of Tim and Becky's boys. And he told you, along with several other witnesses, that there was animosity. But it was animosity on both sides. But it was Rick's job to protect the boys' best interest. It was Rick's job to listen to the safety concerns. It was Rick's job to report to the court anything that was going on in that household that could potentially affect the best interest of those kids. And Rick told you there were no red flags. He told you there was no domestic violence. He told you that these two would make mountains out of anthills. But he also told you that they were able to work things out in the end. They were able to work things out to such an extent that they had both agreed to the current parenting plan that they were operating under, even though neither one of them liked it. And they agreed to that schedule without attorney involvement. They agreed to that schedule without court involvement. They agreed to that schedule without the input of the guardian ad litem. And they did it because it was working for the boys. Neither one of them liked it, but they were willing to go along with it. And when both parties are unhappy in a divorce, you probably have a fair agreement. And that's what Mr. Zimmerman told you. In addition, there were no orders of protection that you heard about. There was no police involvement that you heard about. You didn't hear about the police having to come to Becky's house to break up a fight. You didn't hear about the police having to go to Tim's house because he was refusing to send them out. You didn't hear about any of that. The only thing that you heard was divorce talk. The girl talk at work, blowing off steam about her husbands, blowing off steam about the divorce. Joking, I think is what Sarah Murphy said, that they were joking. You heard from Ted Johnson, he was unaware of anything that Becky was scared of leading up to her murder. All of that is divorce talk, folks. It's rhetoric. It doesn't prove anything to you other than what we already know, and that's that they were getting divorced and there was animosity. But what does it prove in this case? Ask yourself that. What does it really prove? And what I submit to you is that hearsay statements that are nearly 2 and 3 years old are simply divorce talk. They are rhetoric. They are not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Listen to Rick Zimmerman. No red flags. He was the one person or a person that Becky could have gone to during any of this and said, I'm scared, and this is why. She could have gone to Jerry Timberwolke. I'm scared. This is why. You didn't hear any evidence of that happening. No red flags. That is not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And finally, I want to draw your attention to the last conversation that Tim and Becky had. She told Tim, not her mom, not her dad, not her coworkers, not her sisters. She told Tim that she was ill and asked him if he could keep the boys. And he said, yes, I will. Do you want me to take them to school in the morning? And he said, yeah, I would, or some words to that effect. There's no hate there. There's no fear there. This is how you want divorcing people to act. You want divorcing people to be able to handle scheduling changes. You want divorcing people to be able to handle their kids at the last minute. That's not murder, folks. Becky went to Tim when she needed him as one of her last acts, and he accommodated her. He accommodated her without argument. He accommodated her without question. As I said, this isn't a Lifetime movie. This is real life. The state has given you a great motive, but they haven't given you any substantive evidence to back that up. I suggest to you that the only verdict in this case should be not guilty. And I request that when you go back there, you look at the evidence, you read the law, you avoid sympathy, and find him not guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schnock. Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Your Honor.
This is him, by the way, you guys. Can you see? This is Tim. Didn't quite recognize him at first, but yeah. The hair's all cut, and there he sits. Rebuttal time.
I know it's been a long day. I know you've had a lot thrown at you in the past 7 days. I have 7 points that I want to make in rebuttal and an end to that, and then we'll be done. The first point I want to make is what the defense just touched on, that Becky texted Tim on our family ways about the boys and said, not feeling well, did you watch the boys? And that's what we want divorcing people to do. I don't know, but what I do know is that when Becky sent that message, she showed weakness to a predator. The defendant knew she wasn't feeling well, and he knew she'd be home alone, and he knew he'd have an opportunity. The second point I want to talk about is something that the defense said about the prologue and my opening statement, and that I said so much. I think if you think about what was said, what I said was exactly what the witness said, that there were microscopic consistencies between the tool mark and the tool. Nobody said it was a match. She can't say it's a match, just like Jim Riggins couldn't say the ALDI bag was a scientific match. But just like you saw those ALDI bag pieces on top of the ALDI bag and saw what that meant to you, the crime lab individual who looked at the tool and the tool mark said that there were the same microscopic consistencies between that crowbar and the tool mark. And the only reason she couldn't call it a match is because she couldn't recreate the exact, precise conditions that the mark was made in. My third point about the shoe print is correct. We took all the shoes that the defendant had on him. And what he didn't have on him, the shoes that he used when he climbed through that window over the shoe print. We can't test against those shoes because he got rid of them. The defense says that the burden of proof is high, and it is, but it's a burden of proof that is met every day through courtrooms across this great nation. The defense says that we are lacking in evidence. I would submit to you that WOOP data, lack of cell phone.
He's definitely talking a lot softer now, so I boosted it more. Don't blame me when the coughing happens and your eardrums are blown. I also have to prepare for it. Okay, are we ready?
Activity, computer data, the video, the bike, the DNA, Becky's statements, all that is evidence. Is each piece of evidence in and of itself enough to convict the defendant? Absolutely not. The videos that you saw, just those videos, if that's all we had, you should absolutely go out here and find him not guilty, if it was just the videos. But it's not just the videos. It's the videos and how they relate to the WOOP data, and how they relate to the cell phone data, and how they relate to the computer activity, and how they relate to the searches that he made at 1 o'clock in the morning on February 14th. Yeah, there was a prowler in Taylor Hyman's yard. The prowler's right there. We know he sits right there because he was searching for the car that was in Becky's backyard at the same time. It wasn't a random prowler, it was the defendant. And we know that because every piece of evidence fits together to show it. The defense says we're lacking in evidence. What about the shell casings? The defense says, well, the shell casings, that's human error. Human error? First, it was a peer review process. Other people had to confirm her testimony, and she told you in 26 years, every proficiency test that she took, 100%. Every test she took, she had to score 100% or she got fired. 26 years. Human error? Was there animosity in this divorce? Absolutely there was. There was animosity on both sides. But folks, only Becky is dead. Only Becky was murdered. The last point I will make is this, and it goes to the searches on his cell phone. The defense says maybe the searches were done after Becky was found murdered. One of the things about this trial that's been complained about is how tight-lipped we've been. The information hasn't been released to the public. If he was searching for this information after Becky was murdered, how did he know that the crowbar was used? He just got lucky and guessed. How did he know to even look about gunshot powder residue? He just got lucky and guessed. Nobody knew that a crowbar was used. That wasn't released to the public. Nobody knew that a window was used. That wasn't released to the public. Nobody knew that the neighbors didn't hear shots, that an improvised silencer might have been used. That wasn't released to the public. None of those things were released to the public, but they all appeared on his phone. They all appeared on his phone. Searching for Quincy police response time? He's searching for whoop data? And it just so happens to turn out coincidentally, by some stroke of bad luck for the defendant, that his whoop is not recording every single time we see the person on the bike. Every single time. If there was one time when that didn't happen, one time, then he's not the guy. If there was one cell phone call when any of that happened, then he's not the guy. If there was one Google search when those things happened, then he's not the guy. If there was one text message when all those things happen, then he's not the guy. But there's not. And do you know why there's not? Because he's the guy. When this trial started on May 23rd, 2023, exactly 3 months after the defendant shot and killed Becky, shot her 14 times on that bathroom floor, 14 times. One time for every year that they were married. And he left her for dead to slowly bleed to death, unable to move from the waist down, unable to breathe because a bullet pierced her lung, but still alive. We talked about how we could never know what was going on in her mind. We would never know what Becky's life was. We know she was in pain. We know she was scared, but we don't know what she was thinking. Was she thinking about her mom and dad, Bernie and Bill? Her sister Sarah? Her boyfriend Ted? Was she thinking about her 3 boys, Deacon, Braylon, and Arlen? Was she thinking about how she'd never hold them again, never kiss them goodnight again, never see them again? We won't ever know. But you do know what we do know? You know what she wasn't thinking? She wasn't thinking, how could this happen? She wasn't thinking, how did I get here? She wasn't thinking, how could my husband do this to me? She wasn't thinking that because, folks, she predicted it. She knew this was going to happen. She was scared of the defendant. She was scared that he was going to hurt her, that he was going to kill her. She asked for help. This strong alpha female pleaded for help. The single mother who would rather struggle than to look weak, she begged for help. She begged for protection from the defendant, and her pleas, her prayers, her tears, they all went unanswered. We failed her. Her friends, her family, the community, the system, we failed Becky Bliefnick. She called Gary Collins, a police officer, in tears, and she told him, if something happens to me, it's going to be the defendant that did it. You know what she got? She got a pat on the head. There, it's going to be okay. He'd never do that to you. But Gary was wrong. She called out to her friends across the country. And she said the defendant was going to eliminate her as a choice. That the defendant was becoming more vengeful and unpredictable, and that it was a fucking nightmare. That if he didn't get his way, he might literally lose his mind. That he wanted her to suffer. That he was going to go off the deep end. She told her friends that if anything happens to her, it was the defendant that did it. I don't know. Maybe your friends thought it was all divorce talk, girl talk, gossip. But it wasn't. It was a woman crying out. She needed help from her attorneys. She told them she needed help. She told them she needed protection from the defendant. What did she get? She got court orders, continuances, and delays. I don't know. Maybe your attorneys thought this doesn't happen in Quincy. People don't get murdered in divorces. But her attorneys were wrong. She needed protection from the defendant. She cried out to her family. She knew the defendant was going to harm her. She put it in writing that she was scared of him, that the defendant was going to do something to take her away from her kids, or the kids away from her. That the defendant would lie about her and try to paint her as something she wasn't. She told them that the person who would do something to her was the defendant. And while the only person to blame for what the defendant did to Becky, the only person to blame for pumping 14 bullets into her body while she lay on the floor with her hands in front of her face, the only person to blame for that sits right there in front of you, but we all failed her. Her friends, her family, her community, we failed her on February 23rd, 2023. When she wept, we turned a blind eye. When she cried out, we turned a deaf ear. When she asked for help, we turned our backs and walked away. But it's not February 23rd, 2023 anymore. Today is May 31st, 2023. 98 days since Becky was left alone in that dark, cold bathroom in pain and terror, slowly bleeding to death. Today is May 31st, 2023 anymore, and Becky isn't calling out for help. She isn't calling out for sympathy. She isn't calling out for you to feel sad. She's calling out for justice. Today is May 31st, 2023, and Becky isn't calling out to us anymore. She's calling out to you. She's calling out for justice from you. She's counting on you to hold her killer accountable. She's begging you to find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder. Do a better job than us. Don't let her down. Find that man guilty of what he did.
Members of the jury, the evidence and arguments in this case have been completed, and I now will instruct you as to the law. The law that applies to this case is stated in these instructions, and it is your duty to follow all of them. You must not single out certain instructions and disregard others. When I use the word he in these instructions, I mean a male or a female. It is your duty to determine the facts and to determine them only from the evidence in this case. You are to apply the law to the facts and in this way decide the case. You are not to concern yourself with possible punishment or sentence for the offense charged during your deliberations. It's the function of the trial judge to determine the sentence should there be a verdict of guilty. Neither sympathy nor prejudice should influence you. You should not be biased in favor or against any person because of that person's race, ethnicity, national ancestry, religion, gender, sexual orientation, age, disability, or socio-economic status. From time to time, it is the duty of the court to rule on the admissibility of evidence. You should not concern yourselves with the reasons for these rulings. You should disregard questions and exhibits which were withdrawn or to which objections were sustained. Any evidence that was received for a limited purpose should not be considered by you for any other purpose. You should disregard testimony and exhibits which the court has refused or stricken. The evidence which you should consider consists only of the testimony of the witnesses and the exhibits which the court has received. You should consider all the evidence in light of your own observations and experiences in life. We all have feelings, assumptions, perceptions, fears, and stereotypes about others. Some biases we are aware of, and others we might not be fully aware of, which is why they are called implicit biases or unconscious biases. Our biases often affect how we act, favorably or unfavorably, toward someone. Biases can affect our thoughts, how we remember, what we see and hear, whom we believe or disbelieve, and how we make important decisions. As jurors, you are asked to make important decisions in this case. You must resist jumping to conclusions based on personal likes or dislikes. You must not let biases, prejudice, or public opinion influence your decision. Neither by these instructions nor by any ruling or remark which I have made do I mean to indicate any...
I'm kind of glad most of you are like, not really. Me too, not so much, hey. Sorry about that. So here you can see Muddy River News. They've been uploading the footage every day. So that's where I've been watching it from and making all those summaries for you guys. I hope that you have enjoyed the coverage. I know the topic is grim, but I hope that you've enjoyed my summaries and the coverage that I've been doing on this case. If you have, remember, like the video, please. It does help. It's not for a popularity contest. It literally tells YouTube, you know what? I like this video. Please can you show it to some more people? Maybe new people will come and see it. So if they have never heard of the case, they can catch up really quickly on the playlist, which is in the description box. So just so you know, oh, let me take this off. I have been monitoring social media, and at the moment, they're not really saying much. The jury's been deliberating now for 3.5 hours. And in Illinois right now, it is 4:15, 13 minutes past 4, 16:13. And so normally this court, we were used to Letitia Stark. Remember, they went till 5. This one's normally ended around 4:30. Now, I'm not sure how long the jury will be there and what time it'll be for them that they decide, okay, we'll come back tomorrow or whatever, because that depends per state. But yeah, I don't have any other news right now. They've been deliberating for 3.5 hours. They only had one question. They didn't want to say what the question was, but they just wanted to look at some more exhibits. So, yes, that's what we got. Janet says, thank you, G. All your hard work is so appreciated. Thank you so much. I hope I made it interesting for you, because I'm not trying to throw shade at the case or the trial or anything. It was just that this trial, some trials are a little more boring than others to watch. You know what I mean? Sometimes the presentation, slightly less interesting. So I hope I made it interesting for you. If you've been watching, then you'll know what I mean. Thank you so much for all your support. Thank you for liking, for subscribing, hitting the bell so you don't miss out on any live streams, premieres, videos, shorts, community posts, and things I make for you. Grey Wolf Paranormal Lindsay, welcome to $1 supporter. Thank you for being a member. I will have a member stream again soon. I mean, the week is just flying. It's already Wednesday, May 31st. Whoa, tomorrow's June. Damn, the year is flying, right? So thank you so much all for being here and watching that with me. I will keep you posted. I mean, I was really hoping that they're going to come back now with a verdict. If they come back before midnight my time or so, I'll be back, okay? But yeah, normally I try to go to sleep at a semi-decent hour these days, you know? So I'm not on Florida time so much. But anyway, I'm going to be looking at beady eyes in the night, looking for the verdict. Yes. Thank you so much, Anna Souza. Thank you so much, moderators as well. Really appreciate it. You say great coverage. I appreciate you. Thank you. Moderators, thank you so much for everything you do. You guys are amazing. If you guys don't know what a moderator is, you see everyone with a little wrench next to their name? Those are the Grizzly True Crime official moderators, and they help to keep the chat and the community kind, friendly, respectful, and all those things. So thank you so much. Don't be offended if you ever have a message deleted or timed out or whatever. It's just, it makes sense. Just be kind, be nice, okay? And then that won't happen. Okay. So thank you so much. I don't see anything. I'm keeping you posted. Follow me on Twitter, though. If you don't, it would be a good idea. My handle, I do have an impersonator or two, is @TrueCrimeGizzler. All my official links are on my website. I don't have Telegram. I don't use WhatsApp. I don't give up my number and things like that. So don't get scammed, okay? Please. There's so many scammers out there and so many freaking impersonators. There's even someone impersonating my merch on Redbubble. Literally selling Grizzly True Crime merch. They actually banned me because they thought I'm the impersonator. I'm like, hello. They were useless. So just be careful, okay? All official links on my website. And thank you so much again to everyone who has joined Patreon. It's an excellent source of support for all the PayPals and coffees and all the things you guys do to encourage me. Because some days the encouragement goes a very long way. I really appreciate it. Yes, Cheryl says, the moderators rock, don't go. If you're a member, which Cheryl you are, you guys should see my new outro that I made for members-only streams, which is what the Don't Go outro. So, I will see you all again very soon. Thank you for watching. Let me just check one more time, because you know how it goes. Sometimes you like end the stream and then it's like, ah, there it is. No, there's nothing yet. Nothing yet. Okay, so let's see. I'm thinking it could be tomorrow, but let's see. All right, everyone. See you soon. Thank you, members, patrons, everyone.